About a half hour ago, Vice President Mike Pence delivered remarks at the Ministerial to Advance Religious Freedom, saying ISIS is on the run and their caliphate has fallen. Can you give us some insight into what the region looks like now that ISIS has lost ground?
Well, the main battle in the Nineveh plain was for the town of Mosul, and basically the western area of Mosul is flattened. If there's some good news, it's that the Iraqi army has regenerated itself, and that's been because of the concerted effort of the United States military to train, equip, and advise and help them to fight. And they have fought off ISIS. They are exterminating ISIS in its remaining pockets. In Syria, we're closing in on them as well. So this is a bit of good news. The key to this afterward, though, is rebuilding. And the key in the Nineveh plain in Sinjar is empowering religious minorities not only to come home and rebuild, but a new security footprint that may even include their people, their own troops, if you will, attached to the Iraqi central government and the Peshmerga forces of Kurdistan, so that they can be a force in that area to prevent ISIS from regenerating. The conditions for ISIS to return are still there, even though they've been defeated militarily. The conditions are still there. So the rebuilding, particularly among the persecuted religious minorities, is very important. And so aid has to be combined with security. We could advance that by creating some training missions with multinational partners, again in concert with the Iraq central government and the Peshmerga, and I think this could accomplish that goal. It also elevates the confidence of people who have had to flee. Many Christians have had to flee and are either in Erbil or have gone to Jordan, some in Turkey, some in Syria, some in Lebanon, some have immigrated out. Again, the pressures for mass migration will occur very soon unless the security question is addressed. The United States can help the Iraqis do this, and we can create a multinational effort, mission there in the Nineveh and Sinjar, which could actually accomplish these goals. But it has to be done urgently. The Vice President is committed to this goal. I have seen him with great compassion take personal notes and listen to the suffering of that was told to us from the representatives of the people, particularly the ancient Christian communities. He is very dedicated to these ideals, wants to see the Christian community and the Yazidi communities return, and wants to see, once again, a flourishing indigenous religious minority population in northern Iraq. That is essential for a healthy Iraqi nationalism going on. That is affirmed by Arab leaders across the spectrum in the Middle East as well.
Absolutely. I want to go back to the point where you talk about American troops in Iraq. Many are skeptical about staying in Iraq, where American soldiers have been operating for over a decade now. What's still at stake that requires an American presence, and what should we do going forward?
Yeah, it's a very fair point. America at this point has given so much in Iraq, and it's cost us so dearly. The question is big as to why it's necessary to continue any effort at all. And yet, without an effort, we've seen what could happen. The conditions for ISIS, their dark theology, their barbarism in which they are tempted to exterminate entire groups of people simply based upon the concept of religious freedom, particularly Christians and Yazidis and others. And by the way, the people they've killed the most are innocent Muslims. The conditions could be there for ISIS to regenerate. The United States has a light footprint in Iraq now. We do have a substantial number of troops, but they're in training missions. They're pushing the Iraqis forward into battle. They're assisting them and creating vibrant partnerships with them. An additional component of this, from my perspective, and again, we've been in robust discussions with the Vice President, who is a very strong believer in securing the well-being of religious minorities in Iraq because it's essential to their future. A very strong component of this has to be a new security footprint, though, in Sinjar and Nineveh, the ancient area where peoples of varied traditions have every much right to be as anyone else. Without them going back, there's a real vacuum there in which it will increase pressures on the central government as well as the Kurdish government. Iran could fill the vacuum, Iranian-backed militias, or it's hard to think about, but ISIS could regenerate. That's why this is so important. So it is costly and difficult for the American people to understand why that presence in Iraq is necessary. And we want to empower the Iraqi central government and their army to fight for themselves as rapidly as possible. But our presence there is a stabilizing element. We're in the back, we're behind the scenes, but that training mission, equipping the Iraqi army and providing some leadership is essential to stability at this point.
That's right. That's something that the Obama administration has been criticized on, was leaving a vacuum in the Middle East. You recently spoke with 3 Yazidi women about their experience in sexual slavery. What stuck with you the most from that meeting?
Well, when we were in the Nineveh, that was one of the most impactful, powerful moments. We had 3 women who were sold into sexual slavery, were captured and then sold multiple times into sexual slavery by ISIS men. Even with some of them had their children in tow with them. These women had blank stares. The joy had been drained from their heart because of the trauma that they experienced, and yet they were still willing to talk to us. And they held their composure for a time, but then they just burst out in tears. One of them cried out, "What type of law is this?" She meant the law of ISIS, the lack of humanity, the barbarism. She told us that she would ask the ISIS men, "How could you do this to me?" And their response was, "You're an apostate. You're our property." In other words, they don't even consider them human beings. This is how dark and twisted the ISIS theology is, and how they've targeted for extinction, again, religious minorities, but also innocent Muslim people. This is a reality in our world. I wish it wasn't so. I wish everybody believed in this principle of human dignity like we have in America, which fosters the idea of the rights of conscience from which religious freedom flows. Of course, we have our own fights in that regard in the country to assure that right is available to everyone going forward. But ISIS has taken it to such a barbaric extreme, it shows you the depth of depravity to which humanity can descend. And the Yazidi women, and by the way, 3,500 Yazidi women are still captured, enslaved by ISIS, and their families try to get them out one by one. They have to pay large ransoms. So if there's ever a moment for a just war, if you will, is trying to defeat this scourge of humanity, rebuild in their wake, create a more robust Iraqi central government with our leadership, but it has to be a multinational effort, and create additional security apparatuses. It could be fairly easy to provide a training mission for indigenous people attached to the Iraqi Central Army and Peshmerga forces in Sinjar and Nineveh, and that would create stability in those areas. That gives the confidence to the Yazidi people, particularly in the Sinjar area, to return and rebuild for their homes. They said it over and over again, and we saw it directly. Security is the key to make our economic assistance sustainable and viable. We were also in Christian villages as well, some of whom have been very courageously returning home to try to rebuild. You should see in one church, ISIS actually dug up the body of a priest just to desecrate his bones and then threw him back in. It's this depravity and darkness, the forces of which are being defeated militarily, but we need to assure that there isn't a vacuum in which they could refill once again.
Absolutely. I'm sure that was a very humbling experience. Once again, Nebraska Representative Jeff Fortenberry, thank you so much again, Congressman, for speaking with us here on One America News. Thanks again.
Thank you for your interest in this topic. It's very important to the future of civilization itself.
Absolutely. And with Vice President Mike Pence's announcement today for our Fund for International Freedom, hopefully this will put an end to the crisis there in Iraq and in the Middle East. Thank you again.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One America News on YouTube, and call your cable provider and kindly demand that One America News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.